The person you think you are is probably the person you know the least, and that should bother you more than it does. Your whole life, you've been told to be yourself, but every single time you tried, you looked at someone else to figure out how. That contradiction has been living rent-free in your head for years, and you've never once stopped to look at it directly. Think about the last time someone asked you, genuinely asked you, "Who are you?" Not your job, not your name, who are you? Most people pause, then they start listing things. I'm someone who values family. I'm honest, I work hard, I care. Sounds right, but where did those values actually come from? Did you build them alone, sitting somewhere quiet, thinking it all through, deciding deliberately, "This is what I believe"? Or did you just absorb them? From a parent who repeated certain things until they became background noise. From a friend whose confidence made their worldview feel like the obvious one. Or from the version of yourself that showed up in a room where you needed to survive and never quite left. There's a difference between choosing a value and inheriting one. Most people have never had to tell those two things apart. Think about the last time you changed your opinion in a conversation. Now ask yourself, did you change it because you heard something true, or because the room got uncomfortable? There's a man, we'll call him Daniel, mid-30s, Chicago, project management. By every external measure, successful, stable, moving forward, good apartment, solid relationship, career on the right trajectory. He is by every visible metric fine, but 8 months ago, Daniel started waking up at 3 a.m., not panicked. No nightmare, just awake, lying completely still, staring at the ceiling, not moving, not reaching for his phone, just staring, with a thought that kept starting and never finishing, like a sentence with no period. Something was sitting on his chest, not heavy enough to hurt, just present enough to keep him from going back to sleep. He assumed stress. He went back to sleep. It happened again the next night, and the one after that. One evening, he's going through old boxes, the kind that follow you from apartment to apartment without ever getting opened. He finds a journal, nothing intentional, just a cheap spiral notebook from when he was 22. He opens it. The handwriting is his. The words are his. But the person writing them, Daniel doesn't recognize him. Not the way you laugh at an old haircut. This is different. The person in that notebook was angry about things Daniel had completely stopped caring about, excited about paths he'd never taken, holding beliefs he'd quietly dropped somewhere along the way, without ceremony, without decision, without even noticing they were gone. He sat on the floor for a long time. He didn't answer it. Not yet. But the question had teeth, and it wasn't letting go. And the thought that had been waking him up at 3 a.m., the one that never quite finished, finally did. When did I become this person? There are two kinds of change, and most of us never stop to figure out which one we've actually been doing. The first is intentional. You examine something, you decide it no longer fits, you move in a new direction. The second kind doesn't announce itself. It happens in small social transactions, across years, in rooms where you just needed to fit. A comment you didn't push back on because the argument wasn't worth it. An interest you let die because nobody around you shared it. An opinion you stopped voicing because the reaction it got was exhausting. Small enough that none of them register as decisions, but stack enough of them, and you look up one day inside a personality that was assembled under pressure, not chosen, negotiated. Daniel started paying attention, not obsessively, no therapy, no visible crisis. He was just watching himself. At work, he agreed with his manager, not when the manager was right, but when disagreeing felt like too much energy. With his girlfriend, he had learned, over 2 years without ever deciding to, how to steer away from friction before it formed. With his friends, he had become the stable one, the one who didn't have problems, He didn't remember auditioning for that role, but he knew every line, and none of it felt like performance. It just felt like him. That's the part most people never get to. It's not, am I being fake? Fake implies a real self standing behind a mask, aware, deliberate, choosing to hide. This is something harder. This is the possibility that the mask wore you, that somewhere between adapting and surviving and fitting, the original signal got buried, not taken, not destroyed, just covered, layer by layer, slowly enough that each layer felt like it had always been there. Daniel finds a photo from his mid-20s, a solo trip, New Mexico, desert in the background. He's laughing at something off camera. He almost put it down, but something made him look at it again. Not the face, not the youth, not the place. Something about the way he was standing. He pulled up his phone, opened his camera roll, started scrolling backward. 1 year, 2 years, 3. Work event, birthday dinner, weekend with friends, another work event. In every single one, his body looked the same. Composed, positioned, ready, like someone who had learned a long time ago that being watched was the default state. He looked back at the New Mexico photo. In that one, his body wasn't doing anything. It was just existing, standing in the desert, laughing, completely unaware of how he looked, not performing relaxed, actually gone. He set both down on the counter and stood there trying to remember the last time he'd been somewhere and wasn't watching himself from the outside. The answer didn't come. Daniel had always been good in rooms, good at reading what a situation needed and quietly becoming it. There's a term for that, self-monitoring. People who score high are adaptable, socially fluent, good at making others comfortable. Daniel had always assumed that meant he was doing something right. But there's a point, and nobody tells you when it arrives, where that stops being a skill and quietly becomes a replacement. Modern life doesn't just tolerate this, it rewards it. The interview that lands, the dinner where everyone likes you, we call that emotional intelligence. Daniel called it Tuesday. He started asking himself a question he couldn't stop hearing once he'd asked it. Which parts of me were actually chosen, and which parts were just the path of least resistance? His career, chosen or inherited from a father who said stable, practical, often enough that it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like identity. His personality, built or first performed in a high school where being calm and unfazed was the only armor that worked, and then never taken off. And his ambitions, he stopped asking, because that one didn't have a clean answer. That one went all the way down. Because here's the crack, the real uncomfortable one. If your values were shaped by your environment, and your environment was not something you chose, at what point does you actually begin? This isn't nihilism. This isn't nothing matters. This is something more precise. The possibility that the self is not a fixed thing you were born with and are slowly uncovering. The possibility that it's built continuously from borrowed material, which means the person you are right now is not a discovery. It's a draft, and drafts can be revised, but only if you're willing to look at what you actually wrote instead of what you assumed was there. Most people never look, not because they can't, because what they find might require them to change something they've already introduced themselves as. The job title they lead with, the political opinion they'd never walk back in front of certain people, the personality their family has already decided is permanent. Changing those things isn't just personal, it's social, and that cost is real. Daniel went back to traveling alone. Small trips, nothing dramatic. The first night alone in a hotel room in a city where no one knew him. No role, no dynamic, no social temperature to manage. Felt like taking off a coat he hadn't known he was wearing. Not relief. More like weight he hadn't measured until it was gone. He didn't redesign his life. Still Chicago, still project management, same relationship. But something changed in the quality of his choices. They started coming from somewhere he could actually locate. He started saying no to things, not with speeches, not with explanations, just no. And he noticed, for the first time, that the no felt like him, and that most of his previous yeses hadn't. The 3 a.m. wakings stopped, not because anything was solved, but because the thought that had been sitting on his chest finally got to finish its sentence. And once something is clearly seen, it stops needing to knock. Most of us are living inside a version of ourselves built in pieces, under pressure, in public. Across years of small compromises, we never recorded as decisions. That's not failure, that's not weakness, that's just what happens when you're a social animal trying to survive other social animals. But there is a difference between understanding why the coat got put on and choosing to keep wearing it, because taking it off requires a mirror. The coat is comfortable. Of course it is. It was built around you, layer by layer, year by year, while you were still deciding who you were. And by the time you were old enough to notice it, you'd already been introduced to everyone in it. You're wearing something right now. You've been wearing it so long you've stopped calling it a coat. You just call it you. Here's the only question that actually matters. If the version of you from 10 years ago could follow you around for one day, watch you make decisions, hear what you don't say, see who you become in certain rooms, would they be proud? Or would they be confused? Or worse, would they recognize you completely? And that's what would scare them.